Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. So glad to see so many folks out there. I'm Joselyn Cousins with the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, and I would like to welcome you to the Childcare as a Community Investment webinar, which is one of a series of events that are part of the Investing in the Future of Childcare, an initiative of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco and the Low Income Investment Fund. Through the initiative, we are taking a deep dive into the challenges facing the childcare market, as well as the investments and partnerships needed to support childcare providers. We all know that access to affordable childcare is crucial to parents' ability to participate in the workforce. We also know that in many places, especially lower income communities and communities of color, affordable childcare isn't available to meet this need. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the business model for childcare operators was already under financial strain, which makes the need for bold actions to support these essential businesses even more urgent. Communities have the chance to rebuild the childcare system with greater access for lower income families and people of color by addressing known challenges with its operating model. This in turn strengthens our workforce and our broader economy. Success involves new investments to support a sustainable operating model, and it will require partners from across sectors working together. We have held two webinars so far. The first webinar, Supporting Small Business Providers, explored the systemic changes needed to support the sustainability of these essential businesses and how each community partner can play a role. The second, Supporting the Workforce with Early Care and Education Services, featured a conversation with leaders who are advancing the partnerships and investments needed to foster family-centered approaches to employment and business development. Before we move to our presentations, I would like to share a short video from Donna Mason, Executive Director of St. Albans Early Childhood Center in Washington, D.C.
It's really a challenge financially. Staffing, supplies, managing the low enrollment, and risking someone getting sick. Because what's going to happen if someone gets sick, you have to shut down for 14 days. So then you start all over again.
I think Donna did a great job setting the stage for us regarding the financial challenges from a center operator's perspective. So now I'd like to pose a polling question so our speakers have a sense of who's in our audience today. So please take a moment to respond. And great, it looks like we have a really good mix of folks here, which is what we're hoping. So a few logistics before we get started. Following today's webinar, you'll receive an email with the link to the recording of today's webinar and the past two webinars for those that missed those. That email will also include a link to a survey, which we hope you'll take time to complete to let us know what you thought about the event and what topics we should cover in the future. We always like to encourage the use of social media, so please engage with us on social media with hashtag investing in childcare. Let's get started with today's discussions. Please ask your questions in the Q&A or chat box during the presentations, and we'll respond to those questions after the presentations. We have a great group of panelists with us today, and they have a wealth of knowledge and experience on the roles funding partners from a variety of sectors can play in leveraging grants, investments, and loan products to boost the early care ecosystem. First, we'll hear from Bill Krim. Bill is President and CEO of the United Way of Salt Lake. Before becoming President and CEO in 2015, Bill led the organization's community transformation initiatives. In 2013, Bill helped facilitate the first Pay for Success transaction for early childhood education, and we'll hear more about that during his presentation. Following Bill, we'll have Sally McCready, and Sally is the Executive Vice President and Director of Community Affairs and Corporate Social Responsibility for PNC Bank and serves as chairwoman and president of the PNC Foundation. In this role, Sally works with PNC's businesses and regional presidents in establishing the strategy to position PNC as a leader in the community. And then our last speaker will be Gerald Cutts. Jerry is the founding president and CEO of First Children's Finance, a multi-state nonprofit established in 1991. Their mission is to grow the supply and business sustainability of excellent childcare. Before we move on and get started with Bill, I want to pose one more question to the audience. Our speakers will talk about the role they have played in advocating for policy in supporting childcare, but we'd like to hear from you in terms of where your community is on this topic and sharing the results with everyone. Looks like there's definitely some interest. Some folks currently have policies in place. Well, then I think what we'll hear from our speakers today will be helpful as we move forward in that discussion. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Bill and to tell us how United Way is supporting the child care sector and the innovative funding model he is using. Bill, take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you. I'm very excited for this conversation. I want to start with just a little bit of an introduction, and that is that in our United Way, in our community, we essentially do one thing, and that is focus on cradle to career infrastructure, helping every child succeed every step of the way. We do that using a cradle to career framework. You can look at the next slide or advance this slide, please. This is probably common to everybody, but our early childhood work sits within this construct where our goal is to try to help every child from birth start school ready to learn and then help them succeed through that set of milestones onto a post-secondary completion and a stable career. We do this by building an infrastructure. If you advance one slide, please. That infrastructure we think of as kind of a layer or a tiered infrastructure that works to try to connect with individual families through 211 and through a grassroots engagement strategy that builds partnerships at the school and the community level, and then that unites the system and institutional leaders of our community around a shared set, the same shared set of metrics. We call this the Promise Partnership Infrastructure. And if you advance the next slide, it's over the years, it's grown to be pretty robust. It's been significantly helpful in advancing those outcomes. But early on, back in 2010, 2011, our answer to the policy environment question in our state was maybe this, there was some interest, and I would say it wasn't much interest, and it wasn't very strong interest, at least in terms of state policymakers. Utah was a state that at the time did not invest any resources in preschool or childcare, state level resources. And obviously that lack of investment, the lack of a policy framework to support early childhood education is a pretty significant barrier to helping every child start school ready to learn. In fact, at the time, we didn't have a statewide measure to know whether every child was starting school ready to learn, if they were kindergarten ready when they got there. So as we thought about how to tackle this problem, we came upon this idea. One of our local partners, local advocacy organization focused on children, Voices for Utah Children, had a really brilliant staff member at the time who said, we ought to try this idea of pay for success financing or a social impact bond, even though it's not technically a bond, where we know that the investments in high quality early childhood will save the state money down the road. And why don't we try to do this? And so we went to our legislature in 2013 and said, let's make a relatively small investment in a really high quality preschool program that has really good longitudinal data and see if it works. And if it works, actually, this was 2012 when we went to our state and asked them to do this outside of this framework. And because there was such limited support for childcare and early childhood education, we did not see any progress in 2012. In 2013, we went back with this idea, this pay for success idea. And that maybe it was a little too new. We didn't get enough support to get it done, but we figured out after our legislative session was over how to get started. And so we started this pay for success structure with 6 providers, with a private investment from Goldman Sachs. Let's go back one slide still. Goldman Sachs and JB Pritzker, and we just got started. We did that for a year. It was a pilot. The investment was being paid back by United Way and by Salt Lake County, a local government entity that got on board early on, and it was super promising. We were able to pull people together and get going, with the expectation that once we showed our state legislature that this could work and continue to do the education about the importance of childcare and the importance of early childhood education, that we could build support for this. So we got started in 2013. In 2014, we were able, excuse me, to pass that legislation. If we go to the next slide, that legislation passed in 2014. It was the first pay for success or social impact bond transaction for education or for preschool. And it got started that year. It was a 5-year, 4 more years. So starting 2013 through 2018, that got started. But what it did, in addition to immediately putting 600 kids into this high quality program in 2013, and I should say that 2 of the providers were specifically chosen as childcare providers. So we did not design this simply to work in a public preschool setting, for example. We sought out private childcare providers and built them into this model, and initially added 600 kids. The next year added 750. The next year added 1,000, and we just grew from there. The short version of that whole story is that project has continued to be successful. It is repaying our investors. Our state has benefited dramatically by reduced costs associated with the lack of early childhood education, and the kids who are in that program are in fact performing better than comparable kids or from comparable communities, and are on par in many ways, reading and math, with kids who didn't need those same kind of supports. What we didn't anticipate when we first started was how transformational this was. Our state, Utah, again went from being a state where the policy environment was not welcoming at all to early childhood education in 2011, 2012, that barely was willing to talk about it in 2013, that finally took the step of testing it in 2014, to 2 years later, being able to make a substantially higher investment in preschool. And that investment went statewide and was not tied to pay for success financing. It was simply tied to a set of quality metrics. And every year since then, our legislature has taken awesome progressive steps towards building a better early childhood environment in Utah. And it's now the case that there really isn't much debate about the importance of childcare and early childhood education. It's sort of, that's the starting point. It's known that it's important. Over the years, we've gone from 0 state investment to now more than $60 million. When this slide was made prior to our legislative session, it was 57. Along the way, we were able to institute a statewide kindergarten readiness assessment without drama. That had been stalled for years prior to that. And so this effort to change the policy environment taught us that it's possible to do. We still have a lot more work in Utah to do to get to every child that needs it. And we also know, and if you go to the next slide, we know that the policy environment, the state investments, and all of that infrastructure is super important, but it's become quite clear that we need to just be better at bringing parent voice to the table about all of this. And so what we're focused on now, in addition to changing policies, is making sure that we're working directly with parents, bringing them into the conversation about early childhood, about its importance, that we're doing screenings for kids long before they get to preschool, and trying to join a really bottom-up effort with a top-down effort at the same time. Let me stop there. Look forward to questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. And yes, please pose your questions in either the Q&A or chat box, and we'll respond to those following the presentations. So now we're going to move to Sally, and we'll hear from Sally about how PNC Bank is supporting early childhood education, and hoping that this will kind of encourage other financial institutions to and pique their interest in supporting childcare as well. So Sally, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, Joselyn, thanks so much. And thank you to the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco for putting on this series of webinars. I think the content's been amazing and the topic is so supportive. So thank you for doing that, and for everyone joining today, especially our childcare providers. Thank you so much for all you're doing to support our children at this challenging time. So just a brief background, if you're not familiar with PNC, we are one of the largest diversified financial services company in the country. On any given day, we're the 5th or 6th largest bank. We have a retail network of branches that we operate in 22 states in the District of Columbia. Sorry, I'm talking to you live from our headquarters city in Pittsburgh, but actually my son's spare bedroom. But we offer many of our products nationally, like our mortgage and corporate and institutional banking. But what I wanted to talk about today was our really become our signature cause of our philanthropy, PNC Grow Up Great. So if you could advance the slide. So we started PNC Grow Up Great in 2004. It is actually now we're in our 16th year. It is a $500 million program, all focused specifically on early childhood education for children birth to age 5. If you could advance the slide. So it's interesting that even 16 years into the program, a lot of people still scratch their heads when they hear that a bank is focused their philanthropy on early childhood education. But for us, it makes a ton of sense, and we can really connect ourselves as a bank to early childhood education because it is shown over and over again that early childhood education is such a strong economic development tool and workforce development tool. And actually, in a prior session, you heard from Rob Grunwald at the Minneapolis Fed, and we actually attribute and talk a lot about the research both Rob and his colleague Art Rolnick have done over the years. They really helped when we were thinking about early childhood education, help us understand the strong connection between economic development. So just to tell you a little bit about the program, to give you a sense of different ways that financial services companies might be able to support early childhood education. When we started the program, we really didn't know we were going to focus on early childhood education. We really just wanted a way to be able to better talk about the impact of our philanthropy. And what we knew at the time in 2003, 2004, that we were supporting a bunch of different things, but really couldn't talk as a whole, as a corporation, what we were doing to support our communities. So thinking that we wanted to focus the power of this large company behind one cause, the first thing we did was really ask our employees what they would like to see us focus on. And they came back and said something in the area of children and education. And as you know, that's really, really broad. And so from there, we did a ton of research, again, going back to some of the work that Rob Grunwald was doing and Art Rolnick. peri-preschool study, and really became to understand the importance of high quality early childhood education and the impact it has on a child's lifetime trajectory. So when we thought about the program, we wanted to really think about all of the resources we have at PNC and how we could harness those resources to make an impact on this issue. So we knew grants are important, and we do have a large component of our program that is focused on grants. And mostly what we've done prior to COVID is really support programs that were looking to increase the quality of their programming, providing support for professional development, direct services for children, as well as family engagement activities. We also, when we started the program, early childhood has come a long way. And when we started, people really didn't understand the importance of early childhood education, school readiness. So what we really wanted to do was thinking about our power in terms of how we market our product and services, to think about how we could use all of those channels to really drive awareness of the importance of early childhood education. And we've done this in a number of ways, working with our partners at Sesame Workshop and Fred Rogers Productions, not only to talk about the importance of high quality early childhood education, but also to provide great tools and resources for parents and caregivers to help prepare their children for the first day of school. We also have a big advocacy component to our program. So we have regional presidents across our 40+ markets. They're really our face of PNC in the community. And they have done an amazing job. They've really become experts on the local issues facing early childhood care and education and funding issues, and are often called upon to talk about why there should be increased investment in early childhood education. And what we find, again, even 16 years later, is that when a banker talks about this topic, because we are such an unexpected advocate for the issue, we find that people listen to us a little bit differently, and we found that to be a very effective tool. And then finally, the fourth and perhaps most important element of our program is we offer all of our employees 40 hours of paid time off to volunteer every year, specifically for Grow Upgrade. We have more than 52,000 employees, and so you can imagine the power of those employees, not only out there volunteering at early childhood education centers, but also, again, being advocates for the issue and being able to talk about why early childhood education is so important. Next slide. So one of the guiding principles for us is that we try never, ever to forget that we are, in fact, bankers and not early childhood education experts. So I think one of the most important things to highlight is that we have had terrific partners over the years with Sesame Street, Fred Rogers, the National Head Start Association at the national level, and then across our markets, just amazing early childhood partners that really help us set the strategic direction for the program and guide us so that our investment can be the most impactful. We also have an advisory council of early childhood experts, many names I'm sure you'd be familiar with, that have helped advise us since the inception of the program. Next slide. So just to give you a sense of what we've been able to accomplish, again, as a whole, and just a reminder, one of the things we were hoping to do is to be able to talk about the impact of our work across our corporation. So we talk about the impact in terms of the grants that we've awarded, our volunteerism effort. We're closing in on 1 million hours of volunteer support. We've done, as I mentioned, done a lot of awareness activities and delivery of free resources through our partners. Last year, we were able to host a book drive in all of our retail branches, which was really the first time that we involved our customers and communities in our efforts. And we collected over 100,000 books in just a few weeks. Fortunately, we couldn't do it this year. And then finally, we really do feel that our advocacy efforts have really furthered discussions at both the state and local level about the importance of funding high quality early childhood education. Next slide. So the number we're most proud of through all of our resources we have and programming, we have mobile learning and tours, we've served almost 7 million children through Grow Up Great in some way. So I also just wanted to touch on what's changed, since we've been in the middle of this pandemic. Unfortunately, we've had to pause our volunteerism until very recently. We're now focused on virtual opportunities and trying to work with all of our partners to develop opportunities that our employees might be able to help with from home. As I mentioned, we have actually at different times of the year, we have 6 different mobile educational tours traversing our footprints. So we've had to pause those as well. On the grant side, in April, PNC announced that we would provide $30 million in charitable support across the communities we serve by the end of 2020. That includes supplemental funding to support emergency needs like food insecurity and shelter, certainly support for essential workers, including childcare. So a lot of what we've been doing this year is not only working with some additional funds for those most pressing needs, but also working with our partners to help them repurpose grants that typically we were funding programming, again, to help increase the quality of early childhood education. And now we're working with our partners to allow them to shift a lot of those dollars to the much needed operating support. So again, something we hadn't really supported before COVID, but we definitely see the need and are trying to be as flexible as we possibly can with our partners to help meet their emergency needs. Just to focus on policy for a second, we've always believed in the importance of strong data to help inform policy. So one of the things that we've been able to do is work specifically with one of our partners and longtime advisory council member, Steve Barnett at the National Institute of Early Childhood Education and Research. So Steve and his team did a national study really looking at the impact of the pandemic on preschool education. And the full study can be found on NEER's homepage, which is www.neer.org, neer.org. But one of the most interesting findings was that we found that just 10% of 3 to 5-year-olds enrolled in preschool prior to the pandemic received a robust replacement for in-person preschool attendance. And we also saw evidence of declines in parent-child activities, which may ultimately translate into even greater learning loss. So unfortunately, one uptick was we saw an increase in parent engagement in telling stories with their children, and that's great. But for us, this definitely emphasized the need that we have and the resources that we have to get resources into the hands of parents to help them continue their work at home. And then the final thing I just wanted to mention from our perspective was really around a program related investment that we did through the PNC Foundation, working really closely with our community development banking group and really trying to see how we can better connect our efforts to support early childhood education with the work our community development banking group is doing. One of the things they did was a $10 million program related investment to the Urban Redevelopment Authority of Pittsburgh to really support COVID relief efforts for small businesses. And in working with those resources in the fund and the Urban Redevelopment of Pittsburgh, we were able to ask them to provide 15% of the total investments and have them direct that to childcare providers for their needs that they're seeing as a result of COVID. So again, trying to align our priorities, both at community development banking and the PNC Foundation, and our hope that this funding will really help support our childcare providers that we know desperately need these funds. So with that, I will stop and turn it back over to Joselyn, and I look forward to your questions at the end.
Great. Thank you so much, Sally. The questions are pouring in for both you and Bill so far. So I'm looking forward to having that discussion at the end. So now I want to turn it over to Jerry to give us a perspective from a CDFI. So Jerry, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, folks. It's a beautiful day here in Minnesota. We're right on the Mississippi River, and we're just a stone's throw from the Federal Reserve here in Minnesota. We really appreciate their work and the work of all the feds in supporting this work. I want to thank our hosts and our colleagues on the panel. I think the other panelists, just a great example of leadership, risk-taking, innovation, and the difference that corporations and communities can make. And so what I want to do is pivot into what First Children's Finance has been working on for about 30 years. You know, we work on the business and financial side of early care and education exclusively. We're a CDFI that's dedicated only to childcare. And so we view our work as a laboratory, doing a lot of learning and ongoing learning, especially in these COVID times. I want to talk with you a little bit about that. So I thought the first thing I would do is share our theory of change with you. And so you can see in the orangish square, we work on the individual business level with individual childcare entrepreneurs, helping them start businesses, grow businesses, and work on their sustainability. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in a minute. The second thing we do in the blue square or blue circle is we work on communities with whole communities, on engaging community leaders to look at things like the supply and demand of care, what the communities can do about this, engage them in their, invest in their leadership and help them along with those things. Talk to you a little more about that. And then the third one on the goldish yellow is we work on systems level of policy, both at the local level, state and the federal level, in order to increase the sustainability and supply of childcare businesses. Next slide, please. So I want to travel with you through a few slides kind of quickly here. It's sort of like comedians in cars getting coffee. So just hold on, hang, not as funny as Jerry Seinfeld, but just as opinionated. So hang on and let's go through a few slides kind of quickly here. Childcare is a small business with a big impact, and we help entrepreneurs start and grow sustainable childcare businesses. And you can see we do that by trying to increase financial sustainability, empower the businesses, and invest capital in high quality childcare. Next slide, please. So again, we launch childcare businesses. You can quickly read through some of the things we do in that, all the way from loans to market research analysis and business development planning. Next, please. And then manage childcare businesses. You can just imagine thinking about this now in this time, the significance of that. We saw the video clip of what it's like sitting in an early care and education business right now and the kind of things that need to happen. And so next slide, please. And then growing businesses through financial projections, business planning, and capital for facilities and other activities. Next, please. So then engaging communities, adequate supply of childcare, critical component of a healthy community and a vibrant regional economy. So what we do is we partner with communities to develop local solutions. And you can get a quick look there at some of the things that come out of that, analyzing supply and demand and empowering communities, innovation, and so on. Next, please. And then here's some of the kind of things that we do on the community level. One of our signature programs is a Rural Childcare Innovation Program. It's very exciting, and we do that across the state of Minnesota. We're getting ready to expand that work. By the way, we are working in 19 states at this point. So the Rural Childcare Innovation Program is truly unique. We're really bringing together community leaders and getting them onto the issue. And it's a very exciting process. It's really amazing the kind of things the communities come up with. And it's valuable on so many different levels, because we're seeing businesses, for example, saying, you know, we really, in order to attract and retain childcare, in order to attract and retain workers, that we need to have strong childcare, and they turn into advocates at all different levels in this, and it's very exciting. Next, please. And so all of this only makes sense if we use a comprehensive approach and we're work on systems and advocacy all at the same time, things that we're talking about throughout this webinar. And you can take a quick scan there of the kind of things that involves, including building public and private partnerships, working directly with systems to align and leverage resources. And next, please. And these are some of the kinds of things that we do on that level. One of our signature projects is called the Early Childhood Business Collaboratory, and we're working with a dozen states with that right now. It's at the systems level, and states apply to get into this project, into this initiative for a couple of years, and we work with them, helping them create a plan, an action plan for their states to really get into the business and financial side of childcare, and then to align their programs and activities to help increase supply and sustainability. It's a very exciting project. And then we also work with states on loan fund and investment related activities and some of the other things that you see here. Next, please. So now, I really like this slide. We're now faced with an enormous dilemma. And I think those of you who are working in the field and participate in these sessions know what the data is showing us here about what the situation here is. I look at these kids and looking at those eyes, and it makes me really happy and really sad and yet hopeful all at the same time, thinking about what is going on with families and kids and what they're missing right now and how important it is for early care and education to be open safely and to move ahead, and what kind of investment it takes to do this. If you could switch to the next slide, please. I want to talk with you just a little bit about things that we're working on now. So we're putting our heads together with a number of other CDFIs and investors and decision makers about creating a national child care economic recovery fund. And I want to describe that just a little bit for you, and I want to try to answer the question, what can public and private investors do to address ECE business issues in the next 18 to 24 months? And this whole group of presentations has been about that issue, and Joselyn, as you're talking about it, it really strikes me how important these issues are and how many folks are engaged and need to be engaged in this critical issue. So one of the things I think is to target support directly to CDFIs that have expertise or want to gain expertise in the business side of childcare. It's what we do every day. It's the only thing we do, as a CDFI, and so it gives us an upfront support look at this work. And part of this is that, for the most part, CDFIs have been engaged in issues related to facilities. And at this point, I think we know that that's not enough. We need to work on the business support side of early care and education as well. What that means is, I believe, teaming up with other investors to provide CDFIs and other intermediaries with flexible capital, including forgivable, partially forgivable loans, concessionary loans, flexible terms, and credit enhancement all at the same time. And so this is where I believe that we need to go. And I also want to shine a light on expanding investment in technical assistance to early care and education businesses, because we can't do it without that. They have to go hand in hand, those things. The investments have to happen that are flexible, and this involves some of the kinds of technical assistance that I showed you earlier, and other innovative approaches to get there. So that has to be taken seriously now. We're working with a group of banks, and as I mentioned, and others on this as well. When I say that I'm viewing this as let's get some coffee. I'm serious about this. You know, I think we need to sit down with each other. We'd welcome that. I'd welcome that conversation, to sit down and imagine together and then work hard on trying to target resources, and because it needs to start happening now. You know, it strikes me, just as a final thing here, it strikes me that what we're facing here with early care and education businesses resembles what's going on with COVID. In other words, it's rapidly changing. It's impossible for us to predict exactly what's going to happen. And so we need to set up the infrastructure to move quickly, to identify the needs, changing needs, to prioritize our investments, to implement, you know, quickly and nimbly, to assess then the impacts and strategies of how they're working, and then to readjust as we go. I think we can see from watching the news that it's a rolling event, you know, what's happening, and that we need to have some of the same characteristics of, you know, quick response, you know, to these situations, and to be innovative and fast and nimble as we do it. So I'm inviting a conversation, both your questions and possibly afterwards, and hopefully afterwards, to sit down with us and think through what needs to happen next in order for us to deliver on this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jerry. And thank you to all of our panelists. We have a significant number of questions. We won't be able to get to all of them, but I'd like to at least pose a couple to each one of our panelists to get a little more information. And so, Bill, I'll start with you. There definitely is interest in getting more information on the Pay for Success project that you all led. And so can you talk a little bit more about who the funders were, you know, kind of a little general sense of how it was funded to get it started?
Yeah, for us, it was an investment bank, Goldman Sachs, a private investor, JB Pritzker. And then to make this work, you have to have both private investors and you have to have public sector repayers. And initially the repayers were United Way and Salt Lake County. Subsequently, the repayers were the state of Utah. Great.
Okay. Sally, so I'm going to throw two at you at one time, if that's okay. So the first one is, does PNC support policy advocacy directly, or, you know, or through other organizations? And then the other one would be that someone made a comment that the program is very impressive. And do you know, or are there examples of other banks that have taken up similar initiatives? Have you mentored or worked with any other financial institutions to help them lift up their child care program?
So for the first question, we can't fund policy efforts directly from our foundation. However, through the bank, we have been able, not through the foundation, but through the bank, have been able to support some policy efforts working directly with outside organizations. For example, we work very closely with Pennsylvania Partnerships for Children, statewide organizations like that are doing policy-related work. We've supported them both financially and also having employees be active in their boards. On the bank side, I'm not familiar with a bank that has early childhood education as a specific focus of their philanthropy, but certainly you just heard from Bill about Goldman Sachs' investment in the Pay for Success program. We try to talk about this program everywhere we can to encourage others to participate. And it also sounds like Jerry had some examples of banks that are working with him directly on the CDFI side.
Great, thank you. So Jerry, there is a question around whether or what initiatives are you're doing around facilities grants and facility improvements. Or do you have any programs that support those efforts? You're on mute. There you go, Jerry.
There we go. There we go. Yes, we do. It really is a combination of things. A lot of the work we've done over time and that our colleagues, CDFI colleagues, including LIF, have done over time is related to facilities. And so that's still sorely needed, especially right now. There are things that people have deferred, maintenance that they've referred and things like that are relevant and appropriate. So, yeah.
Great. So I think this question can go to all of you, and and whoever wants to start, we can start with Bill. How are you addressing, and how do you work with family child care centers, and how are you addressing the physical facility for those family child care centers? Bill, do you have anything to add there?
Just that over time, what we've tried to do is unify our state's focus on private childcare and preschool and find ways to integrate them. So early on, it was about sharing curriculum and professional development and training. Currently, it's about sharing technological tools within our state. Invests in some technology that focuses on early childhood education. Getting that technology into childcare centers is one of our current priorities.
Great, thank you. Sally, Jerry, anything to add on that one?
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sally.
Okay, I would just add, the investment that program-related investment that we mentioned for the Urban Redevelopment Authority for Pittsburgh. They are working with another organization in Pittsburgh called Trying Together to really help make sure that family child care providers understand these resources for small businesses are available. Other things that we've done are grants that support, for example, a grant program that we have with a library working directly with family child care providers to help increase the resources they have around early literacy. So we've done a number of things because we understand that the family child care providers are such an important, critical component of the overall system.
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks. Jerry, anything to add?
I was thinking of listening to what folks are saying and thinking about the situation, on the ground here, especially as we're working with communities of color, there's a lot of interest and desire to start and expand work, but there really is an absence of appropriate capital to do this work. We spent some time developing models that put together the world of affordable housing and family child care. So it's great for partnerships with banks and others to actually create child care homes that are specially designed for family child care. So that's a kind of a need. We have a big need for that. There really are facilities issues. And so we know it's critical. And before I was saying that, trying to point to a recovery fund that can include facilities, but when I say it's exciting, it's really a tremendous opportunity to think together about things like what PPP did do and didn't do. And so that's what's got some of us stimulated, to think about this, that the PPPs are really valuable too. I don't know what'll happen with it next, but we have to get it to the childcare community, and it has to be accompanied by technical assistance. It's really important to put these ideas together. So we're really appreciative of what banks and others are doing, here to make capital available. We have to make sure, though, that it gets to childcare in an appropriate way with a variety of tools. So I just wanted to put another plug in for that. Also, we have an attachment, I think, that it's going to be available that shows kind of a quick draft and model of a recovery fund. And just, sort of to stimulate your thinking and provide feedback for us. We brought it to the Minnesota legislature, and we're still working on it, and we're doing it in some other places as well. So we really, really would welcome your thinking about what's needed, on that, and please join us in that.
Great. We'll be sure to share that with our the audience. Thank you, Jerry. So going back to Bill, and we talk many times about community engagement. We want to make sure that we're always hearing the voices of the parents that we're serving, that sort of thing. So Bill, how are you organizing parents to to contribute, or focus groups, and to hear their voice and make sure that you're meeting their needs. And now with COVID, that makes it even a little more challenging. How are you addressing that?
So after trying and not doing a very good job early on, we decided we needed to set up an initiative where we hired young people and parents from the communities where we work. So we hire them and we pay them and we train them as organizers and community researchers to go out and talk to their networks of parents. And so we've been doing that for about 2 years. And before COVID, we engaged with parents at schools, at community events, but it was this team of young people and parents from the community doing that. Since COVID, it's really been kind of word of mouth and on the phone. But the idea is that we needed to have deeper and ongoing relationships with families and community members, not simply asking their opinions, but trying to build their engagement in their neighborhoods and tap into that, and then kind of escalate that engagement throughout that whole infrastructure that I described earlier.
Great, thank you. Jerry, anything to add in that regard in terms of community engagement and outreach?
Well, we just, I think like other folks on the panel, and Joselyn, you as well, we're just really, really seeing the power of community engagement and the link between community engagement and what it does for early care and education businesses, individual business families, and then again, the link to systems and policy change all at the same time. I think it's just, if it wasn't clear before the importance of the business and financial side of early care and education, I think it's just more clear and more obvious right now. And I think it is up to all of us on the community level and the other levels to connect these dots, between that, what it is going to mean for policy, for policymakers as well, at all different levels, and that we need to be bold about what the need is, what the investment it takes, and what it takes to deliver on those things. I think now is the time. And so at the same time that we have this crisis, it is a major opportunity for us to show what a difference that we can make. I know everybody in this, believes in what I'm saying. And so I'm speaking to the choir, but I think it's, I just want to make sure that we keep looking at the big issues, including the compensation of the workforce.
Great. Yes, those are the two important topics that we're stressing in this series, Jerry. So thanks for lifting that up. So Sally, we just talked a little bit about how we're reaching out to the community. How are you supporting your employees in terms of their childcare needs during the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a tough question, one that everybody is wrestling with. A couple of things, if we're not customer facing, working in our retail networks or our customer care service, we are all working from home. We did also work with our HR group to allow we all have a backup childcare system. Mm-hmm. So both in-person sites as well as people that can come to our home. And we've been able to have special reimbursement during this time for family members and others to provide that care directly. When during lockdown, it was very difficult to have others come into your home. So that's another thing that we've offered to our employees, as well as guidance for managers about being very flexible with their employees' work schedules, understanding the challenges that many of us are facing with both childcare, elder care, children doing virtual school from home.
Great, thank you. So we just have time for one more question before we close. So I guess I'll just throw this out to you, and I always like to end with, what is the one thing that you'd like to share with the audience, or what is the most important thing that folks should consider when they're thinking about supporting childcare centers as as businesses, as well as supporting that system to allow folks to get back to work. What would be your one final thought that you'd like to share with the audience? Bill, I'll start with you.
I think it's, for me, it would be take advantage of the moment that we're in as a country. I don't know if this is true everywhere, but it's true in Utah that policymakers are paying attention differently than they were 9 months ago. They can hear things that they would have dismissed 9 months ago or 6 months ago. And I would just encourage us all to think big and be bold and demand that we come out of this moment in a much more inclusive and just kind of environment, and not just kind of rearrange the deck chairs.
Great, thanks. Jerry?
Thanks. I think that the thing that we want to be able to shine a light on right now is probably the technical assistance side. It's investment, obviously, too. It's the technical assistance side, because I think, you know, folks, even CDFIs that have been working on this issue, they need the help and the support as well. I'm talking about all of us who are members of National Children's Facility Network. People need the support, you know, to work on the TA. It's not a cost that we can pass along to the folks that we're helping. And so I think that's, you know, probably a pivotal thing that I'd shine a light on. Thank
you. And Sally, round it out for us, please.
Sure. I think I'm very aligned with Bill on this. I think there's, you know, it's unfortunate that it's taken this to shine a spotlight on, you know, the inefficiencies and deficiencies that we have in childcare across the country. But their spotlight is definitely on it, and really nothing works without our childcare system. And this is really the opportunity to highlight that. And, you know, I really hope that we come out of it better than we went into it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we're at time. That was a very quick hour. I want to thank the audience for hanging in there with us and joining us today. And I'd also mainly like to thank our speakers, Sally, Bill, and Jerry, for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us today. And I think I can end with just now's the time. I think I did hear urgency in everyone's final comments in terms of we have an opportunity. Let's step into that and move forward and make change happen. So I just want to put in a plug for our next webinar on October 22nd, and that is how to integrate childcare into housing and other community facilities. And please watch for your follow-up email that'll have links to the webinar, as well as a link to the survey that we'd love to have you participate in. And again, thank you to the panelists, and thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.